Today we're going to use Ajax. No, I'm not talking about the cleaning stuff. I'm talking about a concept that has really changed the way we interact with web pages. Ajax stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Ajax is used on many websites. You have probably used it and not even known it. So what is the big deal with Ajax? It allows a user to interact with a web page while the browser is waiting for data to load. This speeds up the user experience. The user doesn't have to reload the entire page to see results. An Ajax process can be explained as follows. The browser makes a request to the server. The server responds with some data, usually HTML, XML, or JSON. Then the browser processes the response and does something with it, such as add content to the page. Creating an Ajax request requires the XML HTTP request object. The server in turn responds to the request with the same XML HTTP request object. While this object has XML in its name, it handles more than just XML. You create a new instance of the XML HTTP request object. You then use the object's open method to prepare the request. It takes three parameters: the HTTP method, the URL where you are requesting data, and a boolean if the request should be asynchronous. You then use the object's send method. At this time, you can send extra information to the server when you call this method. You then need to process the response. Once the browser receives a response from the server, the onload event will fire. The format of the response is usually HTML, XML, or JSON. You should be comfortable with HTML at this point. XML is a flexible data format and it can represent complex data structures. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It uses a syntax that is similar to object literal notation to represent data. You can call JSON data from any domain. It is more compact than either HTML or XML. At this point, it is important to note that browsers only let Ajax load HTML and XML from the same domain as the rest of the page. Such as a page on html.com can only load Ajax requests from html.com. Loading HTML data represents the easiest way to add data to the page. The browser will render it like any other form of HTML. Requesting XML data is very similar. However, it requires more processing to convert the XML into HTML that can be shown on the page. When you request JSON data, it is sent back and you parse it back into JavaScript objects. Now, what if you want to work with data from another server? There are a couple of ways of doing this, but today most programmers tend to use Jquery, as it simplifies the ways in which to make cross-domain requests, and it handles backwards compatibility. So now let's go grab some data via Ajax. Alright, so we're going to be working with Ajax and JSON today in Chapter 8. We're going to use examples from the book, and as the book says, please know, some of these examples will only work on a web server. They will not run on a desktop or laptop unless you're running them through a web server. So if you loaded the project up in NetBeans, don't worry. Once you run it, you will have your own local web server right here, localhost. Oh, this means it's running through a web server. So let's go through our first example, loading HTML data. So when we click there, we see this web page load up. If we look at the source code of the page, we don't see any information about these maps, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, or New York. So let's take a look at that again. All that is handled by this JavaScript code. Now let's take a look at the code and see what is it doing. So data HTML. Okay, so when we look at data HTML.js, we see we're creating the new HTML HTTP request object using the keyword new, and most often you'll see these abbreviation XHR for XML, and then the H for HTTP, and the R for request. So then we have this onload method. It's going to wait for the server status to be 200. And remember, if you're doing this in NetBeans, NetBeans is creating the server for you. So then we're going to do document.getElement by ID content. the inner HTML is going to equal the response text. So that's what's going to happen here in this onload method. So xhr.open. So here's the HTTP method we're sending. We're using a get method, which means just get data back from the server. We're not posting any data to the server, and we're going to get it from here, data HTML, and this should be asynchronous. And then we're going to send the request. And here they used null, but you don't have to put it in there. That also defaults to null. But this is just showing you can send extra information to the server at this step when you hit xhr.send. So now if we wanted to look at data HTML to see what it looks like, here's what the HTML actually looks like that loads up. So let's take a look at that one more time, the page. San Francisco, California, Tokyo. It's all loading it up from here. Like I can even change this to San Fran, Tokyo, like in the movie Big Six. And there we go, see? San Fran, Tokyo. But once you look at the source code of this particular page, that doesn't exist here. It's loaded via Ajax. Now, loading XML. Remember I mentioned that XML is a little more data intensive. So we have the same web pages before. Notice this doesn't say San Fran, Tokyo because I didn't change the XML document that it's calling. I'll change the HTML document it's calling. So let's go look at the source code there. Data XML HTML, and then we're going to use the JavaScript data XML JS. So here, the same first step. We have the onload method, which we define, and the last two steps are the same. We give it a different location, the data XML, instead of the data.http, and we're still synchronous. So let's look at this onload method and what happens there. So we're going to get the response XML instead of the response text. Let me just show that difference here. Notice here we use xhr.responseText, so just use it as is and place it in there. Whereas this one, we're getting the response XML, because we know it's XML from the server, and then we're going to define each of the elements. So here we go. We do have a helper function down here. We'll call get node value, which we'll see it in this loop. Okay. So events equals response.getElements by tag name event. Okay, and then we're going to do var I equals 0 to the less than the events.length, and we're increment 1 each time. So we're going to declare our variables here: a container, an image, a location, a city, and a new line. So our container is going to be create a new element, div. So we just created the div in memory. So the rest of this is all creating HTML in memory pretty much. You're not writing any HTML code here. You're creating JavaScript that is going to be these HTML elements. So our container is going to have a class name event. Then we're going to have our image. We're going to give it element image, the image tag, and we're going to set its attributes. The source is going to we're going to call this function get node value events I. So the I within this, the ith element as it goes through. So if I equals 0, it'll be events 0 and up to the length of the events. And we're going to set attribute alt. So this one, the source is the map, the XML value of the map, and then this one is location. Then we're going to do container, append child, so we're going to add this image to our div tag. Now we're going to do the same thing for location. Location, we're going to create a paragraph, a city, element bold, new line, is actually going to be a new line. So city append child, create document.create text node, location, get node value, events, location, and location append child, the new line. So we're going to add the new line to the location, then insert before. We're going to add the city and a new line. And then we're going to add another child, document.create text node, and then we're going to use this get node thing to get the date, and we're going to append, go back to the container, which is our div, and append this location. And then at the end, the document get element by ID content, append child container. Not doing it before. And then we go back and loop again. So as it loops through each element, it's going to add it right to the page. So let's take a look at the XML to see how that is structured. So data XML. Here we have our events. Looks like HTML, but these are descriptive language. So this is the, like in HTML we have a document type. This is the kind of like the XML version of that. This is the version. The encoding is the type of character encoding of this document. So most often you'll see UTF-8. If it's in like a foreign language, like an Asian language, it may be different. Japanese uses like a shifted JIS, but the thing to concentrate on here is all this content here. So in events, it's going to have some children. So it's going to have a child event here, which is location San, and then this child event has its own elements. Here we go, location. So it's going to grab this one. There's the date, and there's where's the map, and there's the closing tag for that, and the same for this one. So if you can see, we do have 3 events inside our events. And then when we load the page, it looks like this. If I wanted to, we could. Oh, let me do this one. I'm going to duplicate that event. I think I duplicated it too many times there. Now I'm changing this one to San Fran, Tokyo. I'm just going to give some false data for the date. I'll call it Big 6 Hero Movie. And let's take a look at what happens. Yep, there we go. See? We add this new content here. San Fran, Tokyo, California, Big 6 Hero Movie. And we added it via the XML. So at this point, you no longer have to touch the HTML and JavaScript if you want to change some information. Now let's say I commented this out. There's an XML comment. It's gone from here. I could change that, comment that out as well. Now I only have 1 event, 2 events. Reload the page, 1 event, 2 events, nothing else. So this page would automatically change to whatever information is available in this XML document. And that's the same as for the HTML document as well. Let's go on to our next example, loading JSON data. So it looks the same. We're still working with the same information, but in a different format. JSON data HTML. There we go. Data JSON. Here we go. Data JSON JS. So our first line is still the same. We're creating the HTML HTTP request object. As you can see here, this is less lines of code here. So we're going to do a response object. JSON parse HTTP request text. So at this point, we're using the built-in JSON object of JavaScript to parse the text into proper JSON. then that will become our request object. So we're going to build up a new string with this content. So we're going to start with an empty string of our new content equals this, so at least it's not undefined, and then we're going to loop through the content. So new content equal, and we're going to create div class equal event. We're actually writing this out. Image source equal the response object dot events, the ith element dot map, which okay, alt response object location close. Then we're going to create a paragraph, bold event location. We're going to use that again, and then we're going to close the tags. So we're actually adding a little text here, so it's a little more, looks more like the HTML right, but we're getting the JavaScript objects and inserting it in the correct locations. And then we close the div, and then once we finish running, then we update the web page with that information. Document.getElement ID, content inner HTML equals this new content we grabbed. And as you can see, the last part is the same. No, it's this morning here. When working locally, so we're not working locally, so we can ignore that. And so now let me show you the JSON data. Data.json looks like this. So this is the JavaScript object notation. So we have our events. It contains one here, another one here, another one here. So location, colon, and then the information there. So it's like, you can think of like this is the property and this is the value for that property. Location, date, map, location, date, map. You can add information as well. What did time? 1 p.m. And if we, nothing will happen here because we do not consume this property, but we can, let's see, data, close these ones we're not using right now. Okay, data JSON.js. I will do an if here. If response object dot events I dot time the new content plus equal PR plus response object time and line. Okay, let's see if we get any errors here. Oh, there it is. 1 p.m. That looks like too much of a... Oh, okay, let me, because this moved down here, it's because of the HTML. Let me just grab this last part out of there. So if there is a time, we'll add a new line here, the BR and the time, else new content plus equal the paragraph instead. And we should probably add that over here as well. Okay, take a look. All right, so we just added some new data, time, to the JSON. See, time, and we're checking if it's there. Okay, back here, so that's loading HTML, loading XML, loading JSON, and now JSON P. What does that mean? That means we're going to build up, let me actually explain that. So JSON P, now we want to call data from another server. So this data came from somewhere else other than our server, it's going to come from the HTML and CSS book.com JS JSONp.js callback show events. That's what's there. What if we don't include the callback? Still showing this information. Interesting. So let's take a look at how that works. That's not the file. Data JSONp. All right. So we have a function show events data. New content is empty. So build up the string with the new content. Could also be DOM manipulation. Okay. Looks like the same data we had for the JSON content in the other one. Here we go. So this one is function show events. Callback equals show events. So once this finishes loading up, it's going to call the function show events with data, and then it will load up the page with the data it gets from this outside URL. Because pretty much obviously that's the data, but it's not localhost. And now we go into more convenient ways of grabbing data via with Jquery. So let's take a quick look at Jquery. What's the real name? JQload is the first one. Okay. All right. JQload HTML, HLoad 2, 3. So this is the source of the page. It's got some things here. We load a jQuery library, and then we load jq-load.js. And let's take a look here. All right. So yeah, this example will not work locally. We're running in NetBeans. So now let's take a look at our jQuery. So on navigation, hyperlink, on click, do this. So we're going to prevent the default action. So we're not going to load a new link. We're declare a variable equal this href. So the link that is clicked, now remember this, so this link's href attribute is going to be our URL. And then what we're going to do is remove the one that's just clicked, a current, remove current, click the current indicator. Then we're going to this one, add class current. So whatever is clicked, we're going to add the class current. And then in our container, we're going to remove the old content, and then we're going to load content. So we're going to use the URL plus container. Then we're going to hide it and fade it in slowly. Okay, let's take a look at how that works. So our first hyperlinks are up here. This one has class current. That's the route. The toys, it faded in slowly as well. And notice the page URL didn't change. Let me magnify that. So there's the URL of the page. We even reload the page. Okay. And if I hover my mouse over here, I have to move that one. Cut it. Okay. If I hover the mouse over here, you can see the page is going to call at the bottom. JQload 2 HTML. So if I click routes, it's going to load JQ2 HTML, but it's not going to change the URL of the page. because it's loading those pages via the Ajax. Now, let me take a quick look at JQ2 and load 2. Load 2 is the same information, like this, the whole page. We have a section content. Okay, that's the load method. Now we're going to use the Jquery get method. Select which t-shirt you want to see this year. Take a quick look at that. JQ get. Oh, I think we have to set up the server. Okay. Let's go to the book's website. So that's what's supposed to happen. Thank you for voting for t-shirt. Thank you for green t-shirt. This one's actually calling back a PHP file to run, but since I set up this project as an HTML project, it's not loading up the PHP, even though we have it on ours. I wonder what's going to happen if I do that. So let's just go over what was supposed to happen. So if selector dot append vote. So let's see, var vote equals this long string with image. Okay. Selector dot append the vote. This adds ratings to the sidebar. Selector A on click. We're going to call this function. We're going to prevent the default function. We're going to create a query string. Vote equals is target dot attribute ID. Get the votes, query string. And I'm going to call another function, the data that comes back from this get request, and the selector's HTML will get the data. And so the data that comes back when clicking is this data here. Thank you for voting the gray t-shirt. And jQuery post method. This is also an example. Jquery post method, okay. So register on submit, so this is a form. Prevent the default action. We're going to grab details. Is register serialized, so we're going to serialize the form data. So this is going to change it into like a JSON type format. So we're going to post to register PHP, and we're going to post the details. That's the data, and then to process the response, register.html is going to just be the data that comes back. So we'll probably try this out on the book's website as well. Let's see. Forms. Yeah, JQ post. Okay. Username and password. Username, HTML class, password, something at html.com. Thank you for joining HTML class. A confirmation might have been sent to if this were a real site. As you can see, none of that text is on this page. It's all produced via the Ajax posting. So we posted this form without having to reload it. Okay, so that's the get JSON method, and then there's also the Ajax method. These are all actually Ajax. This is probably the full version of this method. Okay. So whereas load, get, post are very specific, Ajax lets you do a little more. You specify the type, the URL, the timeout, and then you handle a before send. So before you send the Ajax message, what to do once the message is finished, and what content to show once it's a success, and if there's any errors, what to do. Okay, let's take another. Oops. Tons of fun. Expands a little bit. Okay. It's all working as being expected. That's the right one. Yes. So this one functions just like, wait, too many of these. That's our other page, except we're using the full Ajax method instead of the get method. So now if I go JQ Ajax HTML, I wonder where that went. So we've got the navigation here. Now let's create something that doesn't exist. Href equals 404 page.html. Meal. So this page should give us an error message. Please try again soon, which comes from the JavaScript. Here, error. So it went through here. For the Ajax request, get this URL, timeout. Before you send it, append this. Once it's complete, remove the load, and then if it was success, fade the content in. If there's any errors, show this message content.html. Please try again soon. We'll change that to later. Oops. Change that to later. Reload the page. This works. Fades in slowly, fades in slowly, fades in slowly. This page is not working at this point. Please try again later. So that's one way to handle these errors, by building it in, the error handling in there. Okay. Our example. Roll up, that's the maker bus. Where is that other example I wanted to show? Oh, I skipped this one, get JSON. Okay, this one's a fun example. Okay. Get JSON. Okay, so let's take a look at get JSON and how it works. So this data is grabbed via JSON. So let's take a look at that. Okay, exchange rates append, div rates, div ID reload. There's our reload button. So dot get JSON, data rates dot JSON. So once it's done getting the data from the server, we're going to declare variables. D equals the new date, hours equal d get hours, mins equal get mins. Based on this date object, I'm going to create a message, exchange rates, and for each of the data, the key and the value. So message, data class, key, plus the actual key, and a colon here, and the value. Once that's done, add to it the last update, the hours, colon, minutes, new line, and then rates.html is the message. If there's any, so if it fails, sorry, we cannot load the rates at this time. And then dot always, and always do this after every task. So you can add the refresh, reload, this refresh the image for it. So reloads HTML. It's going to be this object we created here. And refresh on click, prevent the default action, but call the load rates function, which is this function here we declared. And once that's done, call load rates by default. So once the script loads up, first thing it will do is run load rates. So now let's get this fail message. All right, so get data rates.json. Let's say for some reason I put a Z in there. Now when I refresh the page, or I look at this button, refresh the page, sorry, we cannot load rates. Why? Because it couldn't find, it failed, because it couldn't find this file, or couldn't connect to that server. So reload, and it grabs the data from rates.json. Let's take a quick look at rates.json. Rates.json, very simple. If you want, you can add another one. 45, 65. And if we reload the page, we'll get something here. We don't have a picture for this, that's why there's no image there. And now, here, you're probably wondering, what's this load ashbringer JSON? On JQ get JSON HTML, let me slowly scroll down here. Okay, we're gonna go grab some information from Blizzard from a game called World of Warcraft. So here, button click. So I call this one button click. Over here, okay. Button click. And we're gonna use the JSON load Jquery's load method. We're gonna grab information from here. The important part is this item number 13262, and that's just going to grab some JSON for us. And there, that's all this loaded up from this line of code. Load. And if we wanted to, we'd further store all this and process it to display it nicely on the page. But as you see, you can grab JSON from another server. Zoom that in. So that's just JSON from Blizzard. So this item is called Blade of the Scarlet, High Lord. Its name is Ashbringer. This is the icon it's using. You can only stack it one time and so on. That's all these JSON properties. Okay. Finally, our giant example. So if we click this one, this list shows up via Ajax. We click this, this also loads up. Oh, let me reload the page and show something else. Okay. So I'm gonna bring up the debugger here and click on, let's see, network. Oh no, that didn't do what I wanted to do. Let me try Firefox. Okay, here we go. Is it going to do it here? Oh yeah, okay. So this part's not Ajax. This part's Ajax. It's good now. Easier to see in Firefox. So let me reload this page so that nothing is there. I'll clear all this out. And let me open the magnifier so we can see the content in here. Okay, so I'm gonna click on San Francisco, and what happened here? No, seems like NetBeans. Okay, click Make the Future. Okay, we're gonna grab the descriptions. Click here, response, HTML. I click this one, so grab it again, this file, grab that, it's grabbing that file again, but picking a different region. So you can see that all the requests that occur. If I click this one, you will see another GET request, there. So it called the server but didn't reload the page. That's the beauty of Ajax. So let's take a look at our example and go through it. Okay, example. Select an event from the left and example.js. Okay. So when the DOM, so it says when the DOM is ready. So this one's going to load up right after the page is done. So we're going to declare times. We're going to use this Ajax request before send function XHR, so for XML HTTP request object. If the XHR override MIME type, and so okay, so if this is supported, then we're going to override it to be MIME to prevent any errors, so that our application really is passing JSON data. Okay, then we're going to load a function, load timetable. We're going to declare this function. We're going to grab our data from example JSON, and when it's done, times is going to be the data, and remember times is declared up here globally. And if it does fail, then we're going to, sorry, we could not load the timetable at the moment. Then we're going to call the function load time. So after that, click on the event to load a timetable. So we're going to do the content on click event A. If the user clicks an event A function, we're going to run this code. from here to here. We're going to prevent the default action. We're going to declare var loc, which is going to equal this.id up to uppercase. And then our new content is blank. Then we're going to loop through the time. So if I less than times location, so the ID, dot length, and I plus plus. I'm going to create a list item, span class equal time times the location. Well, that's the ID of this. I time span, then a brief descriptions HTML. We're going to the dot title replace. We're going to do a replace method, get rid of those things here. Title, and then we're going to add the title again, and add the hyperlink link list item. Then we're going to create another content here, sessions.html, unordered list, this new item, which is a bunch of list items we created, and to display the times on the page. We're going to remove the class current from whatever is current, and whatever is this one, we're going to make that one current. And we're going to clear the third column. So now if we click on the session, so contents on click, that's the event, and what's clicked, sessions, list item, hyperlink. We're going to run this function, so prevent default, fragment, title in the href, so this href, fragment equal fragment.replace, the hashtags, hashtag with the space after the hashtag, and the details. We're going to load that fragment. So we're going to use the what's called Jquery's load method to grab the fragment. And so whatever is current, we're going to remove that current class, and then the one that's clicked, we're going to add class current. And this one, we had this before. This is the primary navigation. So all together, it's going to go grab some information, circuit hacking, brain hacking, the printed launch. And where did we define the URL? Oh yeah, here we go. Descriptions.html. So let's take a look at descriptions.html, see what it looks like. Okay. So here, ID, intro to 3D modeling, circuit hacking, Arduino antics. And so it's just grabbing these. Here, the specific section from that page, and putting it here. And that is using Ajax and JSON.